the best of housing, and therefore these houses were probably damaged more than perhaps other houses would have been. Immediately after the information about the missile strike became known, I was in contact with the Secretary of State and the Deputy Secretary of State and with the White House, all of whom conveyed their sympathy in the strongest possible feeling, in the strongest possible language. The word mentioned was devastated. And I was asked to convey this message, as well as others, to my government, to my Prime Minister, which, of course, I promptly did. I know that the two governments, or their representatives, have been in contact and are in contact since then. I would like to add only two further comments. Number one, that the government of Israel, and let me add, fully supported by the opposition in Israel, has declared that, of course, Israel reserves the right to respond in any way it would deem fit, without going at the present time into particulars what the decision of the Israeli government in that respect will be. My final comment is that Israel took a very tough decision, knowingly, to risk a first strike on it. We knew that we might be hit. I myself was often asked on TV, do we take these threats seriously? I did say, we all did. We take these threats very, very seriously. There's no reason whatsoever to doubt these threats. Nevertheless, the Israeli government, supporting America's political aims and complying with the United States government requests, decided to refrain from a preemptive attack on those launching pads, on those missile launchers from which we were threatened. We knew that this was a calculated risk. We have now, unfortunately, been forced to give the proof that this actually happened. So far, the state of Israel and the people of Israel, and thank God, the casualties were not more numerous. But so far, the state of Israel has paid the dearest price of any of the countries in the Middle East which have faced Iraqi aggression, except Kuwait itself. And Israel, as I said in the beginning, was not a party to this conflict at all. This is all I have to say. Thank you very much. And Good night.
The Israeli ambassador live from Washington, D.C., emphasizing that Israel retains what it sees as its right to retaliate against Iraq, but he did not say that Israel was in the process of retaliating, but he underscored that Israel reserved the right to retaliate. Let's go to David Martin, the Pentagon, who has new details on tonight's Scud missile attacks, which hit Israel, and the apparently unsuccessful efforts to hit Saudi Arabia, although there's some doubt about that. David?
Dan, it appears the U.S. Forces, or I should say the Allied forces in Saudi Arabia, have done some retaliating of their own against those mobile Scud launchers that fired those missiles both at Israel and Saudi Arabia. They are flying airstrikes constantly over there, and they modified the airstrikes to go after those mobile Scud missile launchers, because once they launched, the rocket plume of the launch had given away their location, and at least for a brief period, they knew where at least some of the mobile Scud launchers were. No word yet on exactly what success these strikes had in catching these mobile launchers out in the open, but it is still the assumption and the working assumption of the Pentagon that the Scud missile threat continues. So whether or not they were successful in getting the launchers that sent these missiles in the direction of Israel and Saudi Arabia, they do not appear to think that they have gotten all of the mobile Scud launchers.
David Martin, a French television correspondent, speaking from Dhahran, reports that one Scud missile actually hit the Dhahran airport. We know that another was shot down by a U.S. patriot. Any indication that that may be true from what you found at the Defense Department?
No, and a senior Pentagon official within the last 15 minutes talked to a large group of reporters to confirm the one incident in which a patriot shot down a Scud missile, but he did not mention anything about a Scud missile landing at the Dhahran airport.
Thanks, David Martin. The Israeli army says, somebody's giving me a report here, I don't have it in detail yet. Let's go to Bob Schieffer with retired Marine Corps General George Christ. Two things, Bob, I'd like General Christ to deal with, if you don't mind. One is show us on the map where these mobile Scud missiles are believed to be, and why it was that the original tremendous air attacks by the United States and its allies did not knock them out. And secondly, let's talk about where U.S. ground forces are and this report out of Washington, which congressional leaders say, listen, you can bet when the ground offensive is launched, it isn't going to be a straight-on attack to liberate Kuwait.
Okay, General, you've got your assignment.
Dan, the Scud missiles were probably fired from the north of the Basra area or further to the west. All of that is within range of Dhahran. The missile itself is about a 400-mile missile. It's about 300 miles from Dhahran up here to the Kuwaiti area. So we add another 100 miles, and you've got to put it out in here. Now, why weren't they knocked out, or why did they come back? I think the first missiles we caught, Dan, were on a pad. Every one of these ballistic missiles has a pre-prepared pad on which it sits. This pad is already surveyed in, so all you have to do is put the missile on the pad, fuel it up, and fire it. And you have the exact azimuth and range to your target. Now, in the case of a mobile missile, if you hit the missile on the pad, it's a simple matter of cleaning away the equipment on the pad and bringing a new missile in, refueling it, setting it up, and going. We had a great deal of trouble in the Iraq war trying to find the Iranian silkworm missiles. So I think that's what they're doing here. If you notice, they've done it all under the cover of darkness. Hard to see those missiles when they're being put in position just like that.
General, let me interrupt for just 1 second. And Bob Schieffer, part of what we were trying to get straight a while ago was this report from Jerusalem in which a Army spokesman for the Israelis says that all of the Iraqi missiles that struck Israel early Friday apparently carried conventional explosive warheads, not poison gas. This Israeli Army official says that 7, 8, or 9 Scud missiles, he's not sure how many hit, but he is now convinced that all of them carried conventional weapons. We're also told to Bob Schieffer that the Israeli Premier Shamir has been told by President Bush that the United States is retaliating for the Iraqi attack. Now, that's according to Israeli radio, and we know from Washington that President Bush has condemned Iraq's missile attack on Israel as, quote, further aggression. I wonder, Bob, what that will mean for the Iraqis in the coming hours.
Well, I think the news will not be good, would be the one thing I would say. General, it seemed to me, listening to the Israeli ambassador as he was talking, he says perhaps more than 10 missiles were fired. It seems to me maybe the news out of this is that these missiles are just what they're advertised to be, not very accurate.
Well, there is a new missile under development, Dan, that we're beginning to wonder a little bit about whether this is the missile we're looking at. Something called the Al-Abbas, which has about a 560-mile range, which would have put it well within the range of Israel, which the 400-mile modified Scud is barely on the edge of the range. It also has a larger warhead. It's difficult to tell whether this was that missile, but Saddam had said some months back that he had a new missile. Again, this may be the surprise, this new missile, but I'm speculating.
Were live pictures from Saudi Arabia. There they are, U.S. Air Force planes taking off. This may be the response. The president, in the statement, if I recall, that was issued at the White House, the statement said that the president had ordered new attacks on those missile sites. Now, it was my understanding, listening to briefings this morning, that Defense Department officials